You cross 7 figures on a Tuesday. No fireworks, just a number in an app that used to say something smaller. 24.5 million Americans are millionaires now, 8.8% of all adults. You are, statistically, no longer rare. But you are the only one in your family who has ever seen this number attached to their own name, and that fact alone changes everything about what happens next. 59% of Americans don't have $1,000 saved for an emergency. You grew up inside that 59%. You know exactly what it looks like when the car breaks down and there is no plan B. You built something your parents never had access to, and the first thing you learn is that the number in your account was never just yours to begin with.
The first call comes within a month, not from a stranger, from family.
A cousin's rent is short. Your uncle's transmission needs replacing. Your mother mentions, almost in passing, that the roof has been leaking since spring, and she didn't want to bother you. You didn't bother them for 30 years while you built this. Now the direction has reversed completely, and there was no conversation where anyone agreed to the new arrangement. It just started happening, the way water finds the lowest point in a room. Financial planners have a term for what you're becoming: a financial first responder, the one relative whose success makes them the emergency fund for an entire extended family, whether or not that role was ever offered to them directly. You say yes to the first request. You say yes to the second. By the fifth, you're doing math you never had to do before. Not, can I afford this, but where does this end?
Here's what almost nobody explains to you before it happens. The poverty doesn't leave when the money arrives.
Researchers who study first-generation wealth describe two patterns that show up on a loop, sometimes in the same week. A scarcity mindset, the quiet, persistent fear that this could all disappear because you've seen money disappear before, because you learned about finance by watching what happens when there isn't enough. And a compensatory mindset, the sudden urge to buy the thing you were denied for 20 years right now because you finally can. You oscillate between the two without warning. You'll refuse to replace a broken phone screen for 6 months, then spend $4,000 on a watch in an afternoon you can't fully explain to yourself. Nobody in your family can tell you this is normal, because nobody in your family has done this before. There's no older cousin who made it first, no aunt who can say, I felt exactly that in year 2. You are, in every practical sense, figuring this out with zero precedent behind you.
You get invited somewhere you've never been. A dinner, a fundraiser, a private group chat for people in your new tax bracket. You notice within the first 10 minutes that everyone else in the room already knew the rules before they walked in. They know which fork, which topics, which casual mention of a family property is normal small talk, and which one is bragging. Their parents taught them this, the way your parents taught you to stretch a paycheck to the last day of the month. You didn't inherit a playbook. You're building the account and learning the etiquette simultaneously in public, while trying to look like neither is new to you. Estate planning, trust structures, generation-skipping transfers. The vocabulary alone assumes a starting point you don't have. There are people in this room whose family accountant has managed 3 generations of the same portfolio. Yours started managing your money 18 months ago, and you're not entirely sure what half his invoice line items mean.
The people you grew up with notice the change before you're ready to talk about it. Not always with hostility. Sometimes it's smaller than that. A joke about your new car that has an edge to it. A group hangout you're not invited to because someone assumed you'd rather do something expensive now. A friend who goes quiet when you offer to pay for dinner because the offer itself changed the shape of the friendship. You didn't move away. The distance built itself, one small interaction at a time, out of assumptions nobody said out loud. Meanwhile, the wealthy people you're meeting now largely inherited their starting point. Trillions of dollars are moving through what's called the Great Wealth Transfer this decade. Money passing from one generation that already had it to the next generation that already expected it. You didn't transfer into anything. You built the entire staircase yourself, one step at a time, while most of the people standing at the top of it were simply born on the landing. You feel guilty spending money on yourself. You feel guilty not spending money on your family. There is no version of this where the guilt fully turns off. You think about your parents' generation, the version of them that worked the job that didn't quite cover the month, that taught you to watch every dollar because every dollar mattered. You think about how strange it is that the skill they taught you out of necessity is the exact skill that let you build this. And you think about how none of that skill came with instructions for what to do once the necessity was gone. There isn't a clean answer for how much to give, how much to keep, how to say no to your own family without it meaning something it doesn't mean. You make the decision differently every month, and every version of the decision comes with its own specific kind of guilt attached.
Here's what nobody tells you, because almost nobody who says it has lived it. The isolation is real, and it is also survivable. And eventually, it becomes the foundation for something nobody else in your family tree has ever had access to. You start setting boundaries that feel unnatural at first. A fixed amount you give each year, decided in advance, so every request doesn't become its own negotiation. You find the other first-generation people, quietly, the ones who also don't know which fork to use and also grew up watching the emergency fund not exist. You compare notes. You stop performing certainty you don't have. You hire the advisor. You ask the questions that feel embarrassing to ask at your net worth. You learn the vocabulary slowly, the way you learned everything else in your life, by needing it first and figuring it out under pressure, because nobody handed you a manual and you built one instead.
10 years in, you understand something your younger self couldn't have known standing in that Tuesday moment when the number first changed. You were never going to feel rich the way you imagined. That feeling was never really about the number. It was about safety, about certainty, about not lying awake doing the math on whether the car repair breaks the month. Once you have that, once the scarcity finally quietly stops running the show in the back of your mind, the rest of it becomes something closer to responsibility than reward. You are, whether you asked for the title or not, the first page of a new chapter for everyone who comes after you. Your kids will not learn about money by watching what happens when it runs out. That single fact, not the number in the account, not the dinner invitations, not the watch you bought in an afternoon you still can't explain, is the actual inheritance. Nobody tells you that going in. You find it out by living it. The same way you've figured out everything else. That was always the job.